Hello and welcome. This is Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, 7M4 8M1 Vader's Command. This is an abridged cue. The film actually cuts out quite a bit of the original. So it starts about 25 seconds into the complete edition track. I should have said rack. Track called Imperial Starfleet Deployed. This is 1 hour 14 minutes into the film. It's a nice little cue. I mean, it's 12 bars long, so there's not much to say about it, really. I'm just going to pick a few things up and when. We don't know who orchestrated it. So if anybody knows and has some inside information, that would be fantastic. I mean, obviously, John Williams orchestrated it originally, but we don't know who copied it into the full score. And I'm not even sure that survives. So we've got, in terms of orchestration, the usual sort of thing. I've actually added an extra pick because there are so many cues with 4 flutes and 4 trumpets. I just thought, well, he probably used that. We don't know. But that's probably the case. There is electric piano. We've also got an ARP synth, which just plays the top G flat here as well, which is interesting. Just for a little bit of added timbre, really. And it's actually used quite a lot, more so than I originally thought when starting the film. And really, this is just all about the Imperial things, really. So we start off with a sort of G into E flat minor. And we've also got this sort of, triplet figure. That sort of thing, which I guess is sort of, is it similar to the, that sort of thing? I don't know. It might be a little hark back to Attacking a Star Destroyer, just in terms of a small bit of continuity, just from the fact that there's a triplet in there. But also we've got a reversal of the Imperial thing from A New Hope. And of course there's that sort of Beethoven Fifth reference, which is always a sort of, a sign of victory possibly as well. Quite a sort of popular museum, I suppose, Andy Hill or Philip Tagg might call it. Yes, one thing which is interesting is how Williams thinks of the transients of attack. He often sort of adds other instruments, if they're not being used, to accentuate the transient or the beginning of the attack of the note, with a similar sort of stab, basically. So this time the trombones and tubas are sustained, and then these are short and marcato, and it just gives it that added emphasis. And he does exactly the same thing with the sort of classic xylo hits the transient, so the beginning of the note, and then the Glock rings on. Obviously it's not here because it's just using the wrong instruments, but that's sort of a very common device. You also get it with pizzicato strings and horns, sustained horns as well. It's just a common, very, very common orchestrational device. Here we have E flat minor harmonic, a little sort of 2-bar twiddle. It's not really filigree at this point, it's just a twiddle, just an ornament at that point. And it's interesting because the chord is one which is quite a fascinating one. So we've started off with E flat harmonic minor, like that. And then it goes into E flat Hungarian minor because we've got that sharpened fourth. So the sharpened fourth is only being played by the woodwind. It's not being played by anyone else. So it's not contained in the horns, and it's also not present in any of the accompaniment material. That is also a thing that Williams tends to do. So there is a sort of weird separation or timbral differentiation between sometimes the added notes that you get, or the rubs that you might get with the original chord. And there's already one anyway, because we've got E flat minor. There's a D added to it, so I suppose it's an E flat minor with a major seventh, but it's sort of both E flat minor and just a pedal D. And then we've also got that A as well. But notice where it is. So the nearest note to it is this octave here. So notice that there's that major seventh that Williams loves to have. Of course, you could argue that actually it's not quite. There's some other notes. There's a sort of fifth in there as well. But it is noticeable because of the, it's there's a rub there, semitonal rub. So it becomes a sort of major seventh, if you see what I mean. So it acts sort of interestingly, and we've got this sort of this sort of triplet figure, which actually repeats a little bit later on in this bar here. So he's sort of setting things up. And then, interestingly, now we've also got with the clarinet and E-flat clarinet. If we look, sort of zoom in a bit. So I'm looking at that second voice. Here we go. That's a really interesting example of. So we got minor third dyads. They're all octatonic. And they're octatonic T2. So what I mean by that is the octatonic scale, which goes semitone, tone, semitone, tone, which starts on D. It's a transposition of the original one, which start on middle C. So it's an interesting example of the fact that we've got E-flat Hungarian minor and D octatonic. So it's very similar. And it's an example of that sort of polymodal chromaticism, but with two different things. It doesn't give you the complete chromatic scale, but it almost does. And that's quite a common device as well. And it's something that you can experiment with as well in your own music, hopefully. Just sort of an interesting sort of, what fits with what, how many notes are similar, how many are different. And it just gives it that sort of rather exotic, sort of almost chromatic flavour to it. Notice that the A is also not present in any of the harp or electric piano or piano bits as well. And we basically get this sort of chord here, which prepares us. So that D becomes quite important because it's preparing us for the Imperial March, which is also in D, which we have here. And like a lot of Williams, it's differently orchestrated every single time we hear it as well. So if you're familiar with the concert sort of edition, again, it's completely different yet again. There's no triad or dyad in this bit. It's just D, just on its own. And it doesn't even deviate from it as well, because we've still got D in the bass as well. As it sort of keeps that D pedal going. There's D all the way here. And then the filigree in the violins is this. That sort of Harry Potter-esque D harmonic minor. With one little highlight is that notice this sort of gapping. Otherwise the string crossing is cumbersome with the octave leap, because you get to there and then have to go, which is on the A string, and then you have to cross the D string, which you then don't play, and then go to the G string instead. So it's a bit cumbersome if you were trying to do that down the octave. That's why there's a gap in there, and that's an interesting way of doing it. So you do get one A missing actually between that one and that one. There's none of that. I suppose it could have been filled with clarinet or something like that, but they're already doing something else. In fact, they're not actually playing at that point. This is all sort of flutes and... oh no, they are playing. But they're all sort of, woodwind at that point. So then we've got trumpets and horns doing the tune, and the trombones and tuba just doing the D. And then we just get... but no, let's not forget that there's still a D there. So it looks like B-flat minor, but actually we've still got the D present. So actually, it becomes that, which is another alpha chord that we've had before. So here, like that as well. So yeah. But still over D. So it's an alpha chord, but also with D. So it's sort of a strange one, really. Becomes a 522, I think, is the pitch class set. But I haven't put it in just because I think it sometimes sort of confuses things. It's not really a standalone chord. It's just B flat minor with the A, but above D, like that. And then it ends on D with a continuation, the flutes and piccolos that, you know, keep going, but actually in the film that just fades out and it just ends at that point. Yeah, a very short cue, a few sort of interesting little things going on, just a little bit of sort of polymodal chromaticism, nice sort of rubs with that A. That D becomes a pivot note, so a note common to the old modality or the old key and the new key, which is D minor, for the Imperial March. And that's it. It's short and sweet, that one.